An ordinary mechanic from a small town helps a boy, not even suspecting who is behind his family. One good deed sets off a chain of events that can change his whole life. When a private jet and a mysterious offer appear on the horizon, he faces his most important choice. He thought he was just fixing things, but it turned out he was able to change someone's destiny. The hot afternoon fell like a heavy blanket over the small town of Elmridge. The air was thick with dust and the smell of oil and metal. A dog barked in the distance and loose chains rustled in the wind on the faded sign of the old steel and sparks shop. Ryan Bailey, a tall, stooped mechanic with calloused hands, stood by the open hood of an old pickup truck trying for the third time to revive the stubborn transmission. Sweat was running down his temples, a fan was humming softly in his ears, but his mind was far from the mechanic's. The last few months were not pleasant. Clients were becoming fewer, spare parts were becoming more expensive, and the bills were endless. Ryan lived alone. The garage was not just a place of work, but an extension of himself, noisy, dirty, but familiar. He wiped his forehead with his palm, stepped back, and glanced at his watch. Almost 3 days. Lunch missed again. Everything as usual. And then he noticed movement at the entrance. There was a boy standing on the side of the road opposite the gate. He looked no more than 8, skinny, wearing a striped t-shirt and oversized sneakers. He was sitting in a wheelchair, though to say he was sitting would be an exaggeration. The front wheel was askew, the frame was askew, the right pedal dangled on a thin wire. The boy tried unsuccessfully to push the wheelchair forward, but it only jerked and squeaked. Tears rolled down his cheeks, not from pain, but from despair. Ryan dropped the rag and walked over, dropping to one knee to be at the boy's eye level. "Hello, kid," he said softly. "Looks like you've got a little problem here." The boy sobbed and raised his eyes with difficulty. I just wanted to pull over. It broke down. I can't go home." There was a woman standing nearby, short and tired, with a shadow of worry on her face. Her hands were clasped tightly, her gaze darting between her son and Ryan. "I'm sorry," she said. We didn't mean to disturb you. We didn't know where else to go." Ryan looked at her. Her gaze was honest, not asking, but pleading. "Are you his mother?" "Yes." "Sophie. And he?" "Colin." "So, Colin," Ryan turned back to the boy. "Let's see what you've got here." He stood up and, carefully turning the chair, led him deeper into the workshop. "But wait." Sophie hurried after him. "We have no money." "None. I just wanted to ask if anyone knew who could." Ryan stopped and turned around. "I didn't say I'd charge you. I'll just fix it. That's all." "But—" He raised his hand. "No buts." The garage was dimly lit and smelled of grease, metal, and old paint. Colin sat on a wooden chair, his legs dangling over the side, watching Ryan with the kind of focused interest that children have when they watch wizards. Ryan looked the sidecar over. The front axle was bent, the fork was cracked, the brakes were unresponsive. "Wow, buddy. This isn't just a breakdown. This is an adventure." Colin smiled weakly. "Will you fix it?" "I won't just fix it. I'll make it cooler." Ryan dug around in the corner of the workshop. He pulled out an old frame from a kid's bike, a box of small parts, even some motorcycle belts. There was a lot of work to do, and he knew he would spend all day. And probably not make a dime. But he could no longer stop. Time dragged on. Minutes became hours. Sophie would occasionally peek in, asking if they were in the way. Ryan would wave them off each time. Colin stopped twitching and just watched. His eyes were shining, not with hope, but with the way Ryan was turning old hardware into something that worked. "It's like a movie," the boy whispered as Ryan turned out a new bushing. "Not in the movies, man. This is in life." By 7 o'clock the chair was ready. But it wasn't just a chair anymore. It was a machine, new bearings, a reinforced frame, a soft seat pad, brakes that worked better than half the cars he'd ever repaired. "Ready for a test drive?" Ryan asked. Colin nodded, unable to speak. He sat down in the chair, put his hands on the rims, and rode. Slowly at first, then faster. He circled the workshop, then the yard. "She's perfect," he shouted. "Better than before." Sophie covered her face with her hands. Then she walked over to Ryan and, without saying a word, hugged him. Briefly, tightly. "You can't even imagine." "A lot of things aren't worth money," Ryan said quietly. "This is one of them." Colin laughed. He flew around the yard as if he had wings. And in that moment, Ryan realized all this, the dirt, the fatigue, the bills, was worth it. The sunset was already turning the sky copper when they left. Ryan stood at the garage door, leaning against the frame, watching them go. He wiped his hands on a rag. The grease wouldn't come off. But he didn't try. He didn't know that this was just the beginning. That something would follow that evening that would turn his life upside down. But for now, he simply felt like a true master, not only of technique, but also, at least for a moment, of someone else's hope. Evening fell slowly in Elmridge as if the town itself was in no hurry to bid farewell to this strange, almost magical day. Silence fell on the streets, and only the occasional sounds of cars, distant barking, and the rustling of trees disturbed the peace. Ryan Bailey closed the door to his workshop and turned the key in the lock. His arms ached, but there was something unfamiliar in his chest, not fatigue, not the satisfaction of a difficult repair, but a deep, quiet sense of rightness. He had done something good, and it was priceless. He stepped back to look at the sign, the peeling letters of steel and sparks that he had once so enthusiastically attached. They looked tired now, like him. But today there was a little more light in the letters. And suddenly a low hum in the sky. Ryan looked up. The sound grew louder, and the sky above the distant hill seemed to tremble. He squinted, trying to discern what it was. The local airport was used only for crop dusters and emergency medical landings. But this was no crop duster. The sleek, steel bulk of the private jet slowly descended, the spotlights gliding over the hull, the glow tracing its outlines as if it were not a vehicle but something alien. The plane landed on a runway outside the city where little happened. The landing gear touched down softly, sending up clouds of dust and a long black sedan with tinted windows pulled out behind it. Ryan froze. He wasn't one to believe in coincidences. The car moved straight towards his garage. He took a couple of steps back and mechanically wiped his hands on a rag, leaving another layer of grease on the already dirty fabric. As the car pulled up to the door, a tall man in a perfectly tailored black suit stepped out. He adjusted his cuffs, looked around the building, and only then looked at Ryan. "Ryan Bailey?" he asked. Ryan nodded. "Yes. And you?" "My name is Daniel Hart. I represent Mr. Edward Meyer. He would like to speak with you." He pointed at the car. The door opened and a man stepped out. Elderly but stately. His posture spoke of a habit of commanding and his gaze of a man accustomed to seeing the essence. His hair was silver, his shoes were polished to a shine, his steps were precise. Edward walked up to Ryan and extended his hand. "Yesterday you fixed a wheelchair for a boy named Colin, right?" Ryan shook hands. "Yes. He needed her. You refused payment. You used your parts. You wasted a whole day. All for someone else's child." Ryan looked a little embarrassed. It was nothing special. He couldn't move. How could you leave him like that? A shadow of a smile appeared on Edward's face. "Colin is my grandson." The world seemed to stop for a moment. Ryan exhaled slowly. This was it. This was why the plane. This was why the suits, the black car, the looks. "I didn't know." "It doesn't matter." Edward looked straight into her eyes. "What matters is that you didn't do it because you were looking for profit, but because you have a conscience and a heart." He motioned to Daniel, who pulled a black envelope from his inside pocket and held it out. "This is an offer. A job. An opportunity. We want you to join Nova Motion. This is our center for developing and manufacturing equipment for people with disabilities. We are not just looking for engineers. We are looking for people who understand what is behind every bolt and every axle." Ryan opened the envelope. The paper is thick and smells expensive. Inside is a contract. Salary. Conditions. And a figure that makes his head spin a little. He would earn more in a month than he does now in a year. Is this a mistake?" he whispered. "No, Ryan," Edward said. "This is your chance. Not just to fix another machine, but to create something that will free thousands." He fell silent. "Think about it. We don't expect an answer right now." Ryan nodded. They shook hands again. Edward and Daniel got into the car, which turned around and drove off toward the runway. The plane was still waiting. When the noise of the wheels died down, Ryan was left standing alone. With an envelope in hand. With emptiness in my head. With heaviness in my chest. He entered the workshop, lit the lamp, put the envelope on the table. The table where he sat in the evenings, sorting checks. Where he once drank coffee with his father. Where old drawings and worn-out tools lay. He looked at the paper with the zeros, at his name printed in neat font. And he couldn't believe that all this was true. He felt like he was standing on the edge. That the world he lived in was about to open up in a different direction. Not worse. Not better. Just new. But is he ready to take the step? It was a restless night. Ryan lay on an old couch in the corner of his workshop, unable to sleep. The light from the street lamp fell softly on the walls, outlining familiar objects, a rusty toolbox, a mug with a worn logo, an old clock with a cracked glass. All these things were part of his world, so small but painfully familiar. On the desk, under the table lamp, lay an envelope. black, heavy, as if it contained not only a contract but also a decision that would change everything. Ryan stood up, walked barefoot across the cold floor, poured himself some water. He raised it to his mouth but didn't take a sip. He put the mug back. He knew sleep wouldn't come. Not tonight. He sat down at the table and unfolded the papers once again. The amount was astronomical. For someone else, perhaps ordinary, but for him, a man who had spent his life repairing engines and calculating purchases down to the last cent, it was like a number from another reality. The job they were offering wasn't just new. It required a complete life change, leaving Elmridge, leaving the workshop, stepping out of the shadows and becoming part of something big, official, high-tech. Yet this was not what frightened him most. What scared him was that he didn't know if he was worthy. Morning came abruptly. With cold air, the ringing sound of drops on the roof and the familiar crunch of gravel underfoot when someone approached the door. Ryan looked up. Someone was at the entrance. He opened the door and froze. Colin. The boy sat in the stroller and beamed. He turned the wheels easily and confidently as if he had grown older and stronger overnight. Sophie stood next to him, her eyes filled with something tender and proud at the same time. Good morning, Colin said happily. Look at him going. He drove forward, made a turn, and stopped right at Ryan's feet. Is it convenient? He asked with a smile. Very. It's almost like a bicycle now. The boy's voice sounded with delighted admiration. Ryan sat down, checked the mounts, looked at the brakes. Everything was in place. Glad to hear it. Sophie came closer. We just wanted to stop by and say thank you again. Colin has been pushing all morning to come and show us how he drives. And I pressed the brakes myself. And the seat doesn't press on my back anymore. Ryan smiled as he watched the boy talk nonstop, his hands confidently holding the rims, the real light shining in his eyes. Then Sophie looked at the table and saw an envelope. She didn't say anything right away. She just looked at Ryan and asked, is that very proposal? Ryan nodded. Colin fell silent. He sensed that the conversation had changed. Yeah, Ryan said slowly. They want me to leave here. Move. Start a new job. Somewhere big. Sophie didn't answer right away. Then she walked over to the table and touched the edge of the contract with her fingers. And you think you shouldn't? I don't know, he admitted honestly. This is all foreign. Too big. I've been here my whole life. I know how to build a 1984 Chevy engine with my eyes closed. But out there? Among the engineers, the people with PhDs? I'm a nobody. No, Sophie said quietly. You're the person who gave my son the chance to feel free again. You didn't give him a stroller, you gave him confidence. She turned to Colin. Really, darling? The boy nodded and, without waiting for his mother to speak, extended his hand toward Ryan. His fingers squeezed the man's palm. If you go, you'll still come if I need to fix it, right? Ryan felt a lump in his throat. He squeezed the boy's hand. Of course, I'll come. Colin smiled. Then go. Others need you. Not just me. Sophie brushed away a tear. You can give this feeling to dozens, hundreds of children like you. And not only children. Ryan, if you have the opportunity to change the world, start with what you can do. With fixing. He stood silently. He had always been the one to listen without interrupting. And now he listened not only to the words but also to the silence after them. And in it he found the answer. When Sophie and Colin left, Ryan didn't go back to the table right away. He went out into the yard and took a breath. The sun was breaking through the morning clouds, a light breeze ruffling his shirt collar. And in that moment, he realized the fear was still there, but the resolve was stronger. He walked back in, took out a pen, took a slow breath, and signed. Simple. No ceremony. He became part of something bigger. And he took the first step to where his hands, heart, and brain would not just fix things, they would create things. On the way to the news center, Ryan sat in silence. Behind the wheel was the same Daniel Hart, the representative of Edward Meyer, the man who had changed his life with one sentence. The car moved smoothly, almost silently, and fields, old farms, and the occasional sign flashed past the windows. Elmridge was left behind. It wasn't just a trip, it was a farewell journey. Ryan had barely slept the night before. After signing the contract, he had sat in his workshop for a long time, just staring at the walls as if trying to forever memorize every trace of oil, every crack in the floor, every sound that was painfully familiar. The place that had once seemed like a small refuge now suddenly seemed cramped. He knew his decision was the right one. But that didn't make it easy. Are you nervous? Daniel asked, not taking his eyes off the road. Ryan chuckled. That's putting it mildly. It's normal. Everyone who took a step into something new was afraid. Even Meyer. Him. Ryan looked surprised. I thought things came easy to people like him. He lost his parents at 15 and lived with a foster family. He opened his first business at 20 using his last savings. Everything he has, he built with his own hands. Not right away, not quickly. But honestly, Ryan nodded, his chest feeling a little lighter. Stories about people like Meyer usually seemed like fairy tales. But now he knew that behind the fairy tale was sweat and patience. You know, Ryan said after a pause, I've always thought my job was just fixing things. It didn't seem like a big deal. But when I saw Colin driving and smiling, I realized that maybe it wasn't just after all. Exactly, Daniel answered calmly. That's exactly why we need you. They turned off the main road and drove along a long paved road surrounded by well-kept bushes and neat streetlights. A building appeared in the distance. Ryan narrowed his eyes. The Nova Motion Center looked more like a campus of an innovation institute than a workshop. A modern building made of glass and steel. Smooth lines, green terraces, solar panels on the roof. Everything breathed the future. Welcome, Daniel said. They stopped at the main entrance. The automatic doors opened with a soft hiss, letting them inside. The first thing Ryan felt was space. A room with high ceilings, white walls, screens with diagrams and video presentations, and silence. Not deathly, but working. Collected. We have engineers, biomechanics, designers here, Daniel explained, leading Ryan down the hall. We create wheelchairs, prosthetics, adaptive devices. Everything is customized for a specific person. No universal solutions. Only precision, only soul. They passed a glass room where several people in white coats were discussing a model of a wheelchair projected in the air by a hologram. In another room, a girl with an amputated leg was testing a prosthesis with sensors. Her steps were confident, her movements were smooth. We don't cure. We take back control, Daniel said. That's our philosophy. Ryan didn't say anything. He just watched. Absorbed. They entered another wing. It smelled of iron and grease, familiar. A workshop, but not the one he was used to. State-of-the-art machines, laser cutters, 3D printers, tools he had only read about. Several uniformed craftsmen were working on separate projects. One of them, a tall man with glasses and a serious look, approached. This is Ryan? He asked, holding out his hand. Steven Vega, chief engineer. Glad you're with us. Ryan shook hands. Impressive. All this. Steven smiled. We heard how you restored Colin's wheelchair. Without equipment, without diagrams. Just with your hands and your head. Well, that happened. You know, sometimes we have technology here that goes off the charts, but we lack the main thing, intuition. And you have it. And a heart, which is no less important. Ryan blushed. He wasn't used to praise, especially from people with engineering degrees. We'll show you your area. You can set it up any way you want, Steven said. You can put in an old workbench or we can add console stations. They led him to a separate corner. Spacious, bright, with a large window. On the wall was the company logo and an empty board for ideas. Here, Ryan asked. That's where we'll start, Steven replied. There were already tools, clean notebooks, protective glasses on the table. And next to them was a badge. Ryan Bailey, design engineer, Nova Motion. Ryan picked it up, looked at it, and ran his finger over the letters. I feel like the new kid at school, he admitted honestly. Don't be afraid. You have something that can't be taught. Everything else will follow, Steven said. As they left the shop, Ryan paused in the aisle for a second. He looked back. People who didn't know him didn't know his garage, but they were smiling as if they'd already accepted him. Daniel waited for him to catch up. What do you think? I think for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm not only in the right place, but also at the right time. Then welcome home, Ryan. And he took a step forward, to where his work did not just fix things. It changed destinies. The first few weeks passed like one long day. Ryan Bailey threw himself into the work. The Nova Motion Center turned out to be not just modern, but almost fantastical compared to his previous garage. Here, every device was a step ahead of its time, every tool was a dream, and the people around were enthusiastic and truly passionate. But despite all this newness, Ryan didn't feel like a stranger. On the contrary, it was as if he had finally found himself in the place he was born for. He started small. He observed. He taught. He worked alongside engineers, constructors, designers who used terms that were sometimes unfamiliar to him but who looked at him without arrogance. When he proposed unconventional solutions, born not from theory but from experience, they were listened to. Moreover, they were implemented. One day, he suggested using bicycle shock absorbers on a baby stroller to reduce vibration when riding on uneven surfaces. Another engineer was trying to calculate a complex suspension system, but Ryan almost intuitively showed how to use spring elements more simply and cheaply. A week later, the prototype was already being tested. Every day was filled with discovery. But the most unexpected thing was how easily he stopped feeling like a mechanic from the village. People here didn't judge by resumes. They judged by results. Sometimes working at his workbench, he remembered his old garage, where it smelled of gasoline, where dusty light shone through the windows, where everything was done by touch and sound. Now there was glass, cleanliness, technology all around. But the essence had not changed. He still fixed things. Only now, not cars. People. Or rather, their movement. Their confidence. Their freedom. This is exactly what he thought about that day when he heard a familiar voice. Ryan. He turned around. In the hall, against the light wall, stood Colin. Still the same boy. Only the stroller was different. Stylish, lightweight, with digital controls, with soft armrests and shock-absorbing wheels. Next to her was Sophie. Smiling. There were tears in her eyes, but they were tears of joy. We wanted to make it a surprise, she said. This stroller is completely custom. Designed here. And it's all thanks to you. Ryan came over and sat down next to Colin, examining the equipment. Well, what do you say, champion? The boy laughed. It's like I have superpowers. I hardly have to strain myself. And she listens to me like a robot in the movies. Ryan chuckled. Well, almost like Iron Man, right? Colin nodded. Thank you. Really? Sophie stepped closer. There is something else. She took a small white envelope out of her bag. This is from us. Unofficially. Ryan unfolded the letter. The paper was thick, the childish handwriting uneven and slanted. Thank you, Ryan, for fixing my first stroller. But more than that, thank you for believing in me. Because now I believe in myself, too. He looked at the words for a long moment, then at Colin. His chest tightened. Not from sadness. From something deeper, from meaning. You have no idea what this means to me, he said quietly. You have no idea what it's like to be able to catch up with Mom at the store again, Colin replied, beaming. Ryan hugged him gently, then stood up. He clutched the letter to his chest like a treasure. Sophie looked at him carefully. You know, she said, I think you were saving cars in that garage. And here, you're saving the future. He didn't answer. He just nodded. Because it was true. That evening, alone, he sat for a long time at his new desk. The lab was empty, the lights dimmed. He took out Colin's letter, straightened it out, and hung it on the wall next to his badge. Design engineer. Nova Motion. Thank you for believing in me. 2 testimonies. About who he was. And who he became. Still with hands smelling of iron. Still with a heart full of care. But now, with the ability to change not just one chair, but the whole world around. He knew this was just the beginning. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video so you don't miss new stories.